So, I don't want to be here with you long. I think this is really third day and probably, I hope actually, has been as incredible an experience for you as it was for me. In all of my high school 4 years, this was probably one of those amazing experiences that stands out in my memory and really forged for me both friendships around the state as well as experiences that still lift me today. So I don't want to speak long, but I'd really like to make one point through 2 stories. You see, I grew up at the top of the state in Bergen County in a small town called Harrington Park. And I had, did I really get a woo for Harrington Park? I know somebody was tweeting me from here, which you're not supposed to do, guys. For the went to North Valley Regional High School, Japan, so I appreciate that as well. But I tell you, my mom and dad used to watch my brother and I growing up, and they wanted us to understand that the most important thing they wanted from us was us to be good people rooted in an understanding of all that it took to get us where we were. My father would have fun with me if he saw me walking around. By the time I was a high school senior, I was an all-American high school football player, president of my class. I'd walk around the house like I had swagger, and my father would just look at me and say, boy, don't you dare walk around this house like you hit a triple, because you were born on third base. And then he would tell me these stories that have gotten more dramatic the older that he's gotten about his childhood, which I still don't understand how my father grew up in a geographical anomaly where he had to walk uphill to get to school and then walk uphill to get home again. And then the weather patterns changed over the years as it seems they get worse and worse. It must have always rained in North Carolina until my father told me one day when the tsunami hit his town. I'm like, Dad, there's no way a tsunami could have hit your town. And my father says, unrelentingly, he says, boy, it happened a long time ago. It was before the internet. You can't look it up, but it happened. But my parents really wanted me to understand that what got me, all of you, all of us here, was not these huge leaders that descended from on high, the names we read about in our history books. What my father wanted me to understand is the kind of leadership that got us to where we are were the leadership of everyday people who decided to be different, to go against the grain. You see, so many people think that life is about fitting in, but ultimately it's about standing out and doing the small things that other people don't do. My father told me stories about people that intervened when he was born to a single mother who couldn't take care of him, who put a roof over his head, food on the table. My father told me stories about not being able to afford to go to college. Nobody in his family ever had, but about getting people who barely had $2 to rub together, who gave one of those dollars to him so he could pay his first semester's tuition in college. He told me stories about people when he landed in Washington, D.C. as a college graduate, who went out of their way to help him get jobs with companies that never before had hired black people. And he told me about 1969 when he and my mother found that people in the northern New Jersey area, many towns, wouldn't show black families homes. And it was New Jerseyans, on their spare time, blacks and whites in our state, that got together and formed the Fair Housing Council that allowed my mom and dad to buy their first home. Amazingly, they would send a white couple out after my brother and I, after my parents, when they were told them the house was sold, the white couple would go to the house, and my father says, son, they were white, but their name was Mr. and Mrs. Brown. But they weren't brown, son. But the house my parents fell in love with, and they were told it was sold, the Browns found it was still for sale, and they put a bid on the house as if they were my parents. The bid was accepted. On the day of the closing, my father shows up with a young lawyer, volunteer, I don't know his name, but he was a leader, who stood up for my dad and walked in and told the real estate agent they were in violation of New Jersey fair housing law. And amazingly, the real estate agent didn't even wait. He saw he was trapped in a sting operation, got up and angrily punched my dad's lawyer in the face, sicked a dog on my dad.
Oh my God.
Now the size of the dog has changed over the years. My dad now says it was Stephen King's Cujo. My mom says it was just Dorothy's Toto, a little thing. And so this is how I grew up. This is how my family moved into New Jersey. Because of the acts of kindness, decency, and love of thousands of people who I can't name. They weren't presidents and senators. They weren't great civil rights activists simply like Martin Luther King, but it was individuals who saw things as it was and refused to accept it. And through small acts of kindness, decency, and love, they changed it. And so the two things I want to tell you real quick are just examples from my life where I failed to live up to this legacy. Two times where I began to slip into that seductive cynicism that captures so many of us about the world around us. We're cynical about our economy, cynical about government, cynical about so many things, which is a toxic state of being. It stifles our moral imagination and our ability to see opportunity, possibility, faint hope, and even the greatest darkness of despair. My parents told me that you must manifest your truth, not in the big things, but every single day in the small things. And so the first quick story is me sitting on an airplane. You see, I went to college in California, so I flew out of Newark Airport all the time. Now, I was a football player in college. So if you guys have a second, just close your eyes and imagine me, Division I football player. I was chiseled. Now I just jiggle, but back then, I was chiseled. And it was always a trial, 6'3", sitting in coach, people putting their legs back. I would always be cramped up like this. And at this day, the plane was packed. Everybody was on the plane, it seemed. They were fitting all of the state of New Jersey into this little cabin. And I was just dreading 6 hours on this plane. But suddenly the door to the airplane closed. It finished boarding. Every seat was full except the two seats next to me. There was this ocean of opportunity. I spread my legs out. I lifted the armrests. I started looking around and I came to the only obvious conclusion. Obviously, God loved me more than all these other people. And so, just as I'm starting to sing the gospel hymnals taught to me in a small church in Colster, I start saying, yes, Jesus loves me. And then suddenly the door to the plane opens. And the cabin fills with these cacophonous screams. Everybody got quiet. Their heads snapped to the door. We were all wondering what was going on. Either some kind of heinous physical attack was happening outside, or some unknown beast was about to walk onto the plane. Unfortunately, it was a ladder. And this beast came onto the plane. It had 3 heads. It was a mother, a little boy, and a baby. And I'm sorry, this baby should have been, Xavier should have been interested in him because he had mutant powers. He was just one lung. All he did was scream. And I'm telling you that this child was like a nuclear-powered speaker. And just when this baby walks in screaming, everybody on that plane knew where that child was sitting. And almost as if unison happened, they went from looking at the baby, all the people on the plane looked at me. And there's a few moments in your life you're going to have where you have extrasensory perception and can read everyone's mind. Because I knew everybody on that plane was looking at me and thinking, you smug little man, it serves you right. And now this woman and her 2 children come to sit next to me. The whole time I'm saying, please don't sit here, please don't sit here. And she comes, and there are going to be times in your life where you do this too. You ask absolutely stupid questions. Don't let anybody tell you there's no such thing as a bad question. Because this point I asked it. She said, sir, I'm sitting there. And I looked at her and I said, are you sure? And she went through the charade of looking at her ticket and said, yes, sir, we're sitting there. Now 3 bodies sit down next to me in the 2 seats, a screaming baby, and I can only now think of one Bible verse from my childhood, and I think to myself, oh Lord, why hast thou forsaken me? And then, suddenly, I had this thought. You see, my parents had taught me different. They taught me that life is about the small moments, and we have so much more power than we manifest. We don't have to surrender to circumstance. Life is always about making one choice over and over and over again, either accepting conditions as they are or taking responsibility for changing them. And I realized that this was crazy. I was surrendering my power, that I could either let this be the worst flight of my life, or I could take responsibility, get rid of my cynicism, and use the moral courage to step out a little bit, take a risk and try to make it the best. And so I jumped out there to try to make it the best. I started talking to the woman, and as soon as I got out of my own drama and self-absorption, I suddenly started talking to her and saw compassion, that she was terrified. Everybody was staring at her, cutting her with their eyes. And suddenly I felt even deeper compassion. I started talking to her, making faces at the baby. Before you knew it, the baby started calming down. We took off. I started playing tic-tac-toe with the little kid, and I remember a movie came on, and the mother said, I haven't seen the movie in so long. I said, watch the movie. I'll continue playing games with your son. It's such a good movie. And I started turning to the boy as soon as the mother got the headphones on, and I started telling that young boy all the jokes I knew barely appropriate for a 7-year-old. Like, why did Tigger and Eeyore have their heads in the toilet? Because they were looking for poo. Doesn't get any better than this, guys. Doesn't get any better than this. By the time the plane landed, we were fast friends. It was the quickest flight I ever took cross country. We exchanged addresses, saying we would keep in touch. We didn't keep in touch. 5 years passed, 10 years passed, 15 years passed, and now I was running for mayor of the city of Newark. It was my first race, one in which I lost. And I recommend to all of you, if you're going to have a spectacular failure in your life, have a documentary team there to capture it. Because it got made into a movie that got nominated for an Oscar. But then ignominiously, the movie lost to March of the Dagnap Penguins. On the toughest day of that election, I get a letter in the mail saying, you may not remember me, but I am a woman who met you on a plane 15 years ago. I will never forget your kindness. She went on to talk about that was the first time she flew with her kids and how meaningful it was to her. And she ended the letter saying, I see you were running for office. My family has a factory in Newark. We have many residents that work for us. She invited me to come to the factory. She ended up being a campaign contributor, helping people to get on my campaign team. And that little boy that I tortured with the worst jokes in the world became one of my best volunteers on the campaign. It is the little things that matter. My mom used to tell me that there's an old saying that says, who you are speaks so loudly I can't hear what you say. Leadership is not about the big speech. It's not about the big policy initiative. It's about the small acts of kindness. And that's why I want to end with this story. When I was running for mayor, the next time, when I would go on and win, I was living in high-rise public housing projects, a place in New York called Brick Towers. I had watched kids grow up, and a bunch of the kids I used to watch grow up used to hang out in my lobby. I saw them starting to get involved with gang graffiti and things that worried me. And so I decided that I needed to intervene, and I asked them if they'd like to go out to a movie one night when I came home, and they were sitting there in the lobby, and they said, yeah, sure. I go, well, whatever movie you want to go to, your choice. And I thought they were taking me to a home improvement movie, because they said, we want to go see Saw. But I started taking them out to the dinner, and I started bringing friends of mine that had been involved with gangs but got out, bringing friends of mine that had been involved in drug trade and gotten out, to start to try to get them mentors. But suddenly I became busy because, hey, I was running for mayor. I didn't have time for a lot of the little things I was involved with. I was chasing after the brass ring. I was charging the hill. This was important stuff. The city was in crisis, and I was going to be one of the leaders to help solve the big problems. And so I didn't follow up with the kids, but they were always there when I came home at night during a campaign. They actually cheered me on. They would encourage me at night. One of them reminded me of my dad so much. Young guy, born to a single mom, had the same wit as my father, same sense of humor, but I didn't have that much time to even spend in the lobby with them. I had to get up early the next morning. One night I came home, and they had all found lawn signs, and were waving the lawn signs at me when I walked home, and I did a mock salute to them as I walked past, until I realized, wait, where did they get those lawn signs from? I won the election. 2006, now I'm mayor of the city. And I tell you, at that point, Violent crime was spiking in Newark. We brought the rate down, but then it was getting worse and worse and worse. So I was on a big mission. I was running around to every shooting in the city. If it was at 2 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was there. I was giving big speeches on street corners, talking to people. My first month, I was so engaged. We were working on big policies. We were working on big initiatives. One day, 1 month into my time as mayor, I come to a street corner, Court Street in Newark. One body on the ground, dead. Another one in an ambulance being rushed to the hospital. But I barely had paid attention to the one covered in the sheet because I was mayor and I was going to go cater to my community, talk to people that were better than this, were stronger than this. That night, I went home, all mayoral. I sat at night, looking at my BlackBerry, looking through the incident reports, getting ready for the next day of big actions and big work. And then on my BlackBerry, I saw it. I saw a name. A teenager, your age. It was a name, it was a victim's report, it was the kid that was killed. He was the kid from my lobby. The one that reminded me of my dad. I prayed that I had it wrong, that there must be some confusion. It couldn't be the kid from my building. But it was. In front of my face every day when I came home, the kid that obviously needed help, needed intervention, needed a mentor, needed me, my father. People who took time out and engaged my dad to keep him going down a road, who didn't just walk past them on the way home. They stopped and gave my dad love, support. I'm here because of them. And all I could do at that moment was stare at this name. Dear God, it can't be the kid from my lobby. On the day that we all went to the funeral home, I suddenly wasn't feeling mayoral. I stood in the back as it was crowded with everybody. Community leaders, politicians, people from the neighborhood, teachers, classmates, all there as his body lay in a coffin. People came up to me, but I had no speeches in me. I had no profound words. I had no wisdom and no comfort because I was struggling with my own darkness. I heard the words of our ancestors mock me. I heard the words of Martin Luther King that says we'll have to repent today, not for the vitriolic words and violent actions of the bad people, but the appalling silence and inaction of the good people. I was a good person, but I didn't act. I left that funeral home, went back to City Hall in Newark. I was only a month into my mayoralty. I locked the doors to my office. I found a corner and I sat down and I cried. How could all of us be there for the kid's funeral, but none of us could be there for his life? My fellow men, from New Jersey's boy state, you all will go on, I know it in my heart, and do big things. I know what my classmates are doing here in New Jersey and beyond. You are called to greatness. Answer that call. But please, in your life, make sure you never forget the power of the small things. That your true call of leadership is to, in every moment that you can, show kindness and decency and mercy and love. Because at the end of the day, you are here because of love. Because of a conspiracy of love. Because of people who did not shortchange the small in the search for the big. Because of the people that paid attention to those things that ultimately make life worth living. I say to you today, I look at you, I was telling the people on the side, it feels like yesterday that I was here. But I'm telling you, the days are slow, but the years will fly by. Don't be one of those people that counts the years. Make each year count. Make them count with kindness, make them count with love. And if you live that way, then and only then will you truly be a great leader. Thank you very much.